In 1962, a young American black man once said, "Any religion that professes to be concerned about the souls of men and not concerned about the city government that damns the soul, the economic conditions that corrupt the soul, the slum conditions, the social evils that cripple the soul, is a dry, dead, do-nothing religion in need of new blood." From 1619, Africans were brought to America to be slaves and were considered the property of their owners with no human rights. For over 300 years, the oppression black people had to go through would be enough to bring tears to your eyes. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln declared all slaves to be free. And in 1865, the Civil War between the northern and southern states of America ended. Though the majority no longer had physical chains, many were now in social, financial, and political bondage. A young black man who God had been raising in the background in some of this time of unrest brought positive social and legislative change that brought favor to black people through marches, through cities, peaceful protests, and hope-filled speeches. Martin Luther King Jr., original name Michael King Jr., was born January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement in the United States from the mid-1950s until 1968, when he was assassinated. In August 1963, 100 years after black slaves were told they were free by the President of America, Martin Luther King came to Washington, D.C. in front of 200,000 people and delivered a speech that would define the civil rights movement. This now world-famous speech was not what he was originally going to share, but was inspired in the moment when a spectator asked him to share the dream. This speech and who Martin Luther King Jr. represented was a threat to American life that was functioning in an unjust and unequal way that favored the white people, particularly the rich and wealthy. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Martin Luther King didn't just care about how black people were being treated by white people in America. He welcomed white people and really wanted all people to fight against injustice and oppression. It was Martin Luther King's faith that became a problem within the civil rights movement, as other groups of people wanted change but couldn't perceive faith as the answer. The end goal seemed the same, but the agenda and the process of getting there was completely different. But Martin Luther King addressed this with honesty. We must admit, we as Christians have often lagged behind at this point. Slavery could not have existed in the United States for almost 250 years if the church had really taken a stand against it. Segregation could not exist today in the United States if the church took a stand against it. Too often, the churches talk about a future good over yonder, not concerned about the present evil over here. There were groups at the time that claimed that religion was the opiate of the people as it lacked action. However, Martin Luther King believed that the correct and necessary action has to be rooted in the truth of God. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King's message was the outworking of the gospel and its heavenly perspective being manifested in the life of a believer. The outworking of the gospel in our lives is the only real answer to the spirit of racism and all its manifestations that has unknowingly enslaved the minds and attitudes of many. The gospel is our empowering narrative that we are called to walk in and lead people to. We cannot be ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. Christians are called to reveal God's heart and ways for mankind in how we love each other and confront all forms of injustice. What we learn about Martin Luther King is that the gospel works. So be encouraged for the gospel to work in you too.